Hey guys, I guess it's finally going. We had some issues happening there for a second. But my name is Emma. I'm an Atlanta-based dancer and choreographer. I make dance. I do dance. Dance is life, essentially. Today I'm just gonna be talking about dance, the thing I know best, and how we create choreography, and then a little bit at the end for people who aren't as familiar with dance, aren't necessarily dancers, how to watch dance and how to talk about dance, because sometimes it's a little overwhelming. It feels like this like insular world when really it's not. Everybody's body moves, everybody gets drunk and dances, everybody dances around their kitchen sometimes, everybody does that. So kind of to start off talking about choreography, we have to start off talking about just some kind of terms that we use in dance. We've stolen a lot of things from music. So if you're any sort of musician, you're going to hear a lot of words that you're familiar with. But basically, when we're creating dance, we create phrases, again, like in music. If you have like a 4/4 time, you're going to have 4 notes in theory, if they're quarter notes in the phrase. But in dance, you're going to have movements inside a phrase. So like a really good example of that is like a TikTok dance is technically a phrase. It's a set of movements that are in a section that you can call it like phrase 1, or like when I'm creating, we always give it fun names so we can like figure out what it is. So we'll be like, yes, the clown phrase, or something that like inspires us, that like triggers your memory. So we're gonna have a phrase, and then a lot of choreography starts off with improvisation. So you just go in and you move. So some choreography starts off with guided improvisation. So you go in thinking of some ideas, thinking of some terms, thinking of some guiding points to lead you. So like when I'm creating, a lot of the times I start off with words or like a poem or questions that I'm trying to answer. So right now I'm working on a work with a friend. We're having to do it via like FaceTime and Zoom, because that's just the world we live in. And we're really talking about what it means to be distant and what it means to be close to each other, and what it means to live and create in this weird quarantine time where creation kind of seems counterintuitive. Like we aren't being asked to create, even though it's something that we need to do. So I went in the other day, made my kitchen my studio, and I started with the idea of distance, and then the idea of what it means to grab something and let go, what it means to feel the space between us, and then what it means to be like isolated. So in my body, I started figuring that out. So you have to feel what isolation feels, and I just record everything. So I basically just mess around for like 20 minutes and record it. And then I go back later and try and see like what I like, what I hate, what just came out. So like I recorded like 20 minutes of just moving, shaking. You can't eat the sign. And then as I'm looking back at it, I'm finding chunks that I like, things that I don't like. Sometimes it's like a 5-second like movement that just looks cool, that somehow came out of me, that I can say, yes, I like that. So oftentimes I'll go through, I'll chop all those up, I'll put them into like a separate file. So for me, I've definitely become contingent on technology right now. Like when I'm creating, when I have other people around, I usually have someone that has worked with me a lot. I have a really good friend who honestly like comes with me when I do like big projects and choreograph, that I'll just like do something and I'll be like, what was that I did? Which is kind of how like famous choreographers worked. And a lot of times they had like someone that was their physical like video recorder to like record, and they just like knew what this person did. But for me, it's the camera. And then I go back and I'll watch that video of those like smaller clips of things that I really like. And then I'll go through and try and make sense of something of that. Like, and again, this is like very early stages. It's usually nothing like what the actual choreography ends up looking like, but I'll be like, oh, I like the way like that arm moves, or I like the way I did something here, or I'll find that I'm repeating a lot of the same motifs or motions, and then I start improvising off of that. So like the other day when I looked at the video, I realized I was doing a lot of this, and so I went back and said, okay, like what is this? How do we riff off of like hearing and like what happens to our ears and like feeling that space, and talking about, because we were talking about distance in this piece that we're working on, what does it mean? Like, why is this important? Like, why is like hearing friends and family members so comforting versus just like texting them? Like for me right now, that's like been a lifeline. So I, again, in choreography, began to just like explore that idea. And I also just let myself create a phrase with those clips and then attempted to remember and make it. So then I like put together like 5 different sets of like little choreography sets. And so then, okay, I started like with this, and then I went into something else. And then as I do it more and more, it starts morphing because those transitions obviously need to be smoothed out because I never created them together. And so as those get smoothed out, everything changes, and eventually it looks nothing like the improvisation I started with. And then usually I'll have about like a minute and a half phrase ready, and I'll take that. And when I'm working with other dancers, which I usually do, most of my casts are larger. I really like working with like larger groups. The smallest I've ever worked with is like 3. I just like seeing a lot of bodies in space. But usually I'll take that like minute and a half phrase into the studio, and I'll bring it to my dancers. And so I'll bring it to them and I'll say, hey, we're just gonna learn it. I just wanna see what it looks like on you, because everybody moves differently. I have like ridiculously long arms that just like move in ways that most people's arms like shouldn't move. Dislocated shoulders will do that too. So a lot of times if I'm doing like some weirdness, it just doesn't look good on other people's bodies, or they just like, they're physically can't do that. So then we start like looking at things and looking, okay, like what works on your body? Because if I'm not performing it, it doesn't matter what it looks like on me. It matters what it looks like on my dancers. So then we'll go in and we'll just start working. So we'll take that phrase, and then once they have it, usually I start fucking with it, basically. So one of the things I learned from one of my mentors is we'll take the phrase. So in a full dance phrase, you'll have arm movements and leg movements. So your arms are moving, your legs are moving, you've learned it, you know it. And then we'll take what happens in the legs. So if it's like a step, your right leg goes out, it comes into what we call like a passe, and you step over and like maybe you do a turn. And I'll say, okay, we're gonna take that, and everything that your legs do, I want your arms to now do. So if it's like step, we have to do it with our arms. And then your right leg goes out, so your right arm would go out, and then it would come in, and then we'd have to discuss, well, what do we want like a turn to be? Like, what does that mean? And then we'll figure it out. And now we have an arm phrase that used to be what the legs were. And then sometimes to really get crazy, we'll take like what the arms are doing. So if they were like up and they were opening, but now the legs are doing that. So you have to figure out how the leg is gonna do what the arms are gonna do. And then if we're really getting crazy, sometimes we put the 2 together, which can really mess with your mind. But it's a really fun exercise, and it brings like a lot of your tendencies and things that I definitely lean on. I tend to create very similar work unless I start messing with it. Like my improvisations, we all have patterns, like in anything that we create, and they're very obvious when I improvise. And so when I start messing with things and like deconstructing them and putting them back together again, a lot of those patterns disappear, or you can see glimmers of them, but it's not like the same A, B, A, B, A, B, there's a leg, B, you know, it's all messed up. So then we start making a bunch of different phrases off of that one phrase. So we have the original phrase, and then we have the one that we just did where we took, like I said, like the leg movements and put them into the arms. That's another one. And then one where we took the arm movements and put them into the legs. And then we have one where we put it all together. And then I oftentimes view phrases not as linear but cyclical. So sometimes I'll ask my dancers, okay, so like I gave you this phrase as a linear situation, but it never ends. So I want you to start here on this like cycle of movement, and someone else is going to start here on this cycle of movement, and we're going to see what happens because of that. Because some of those, like the transitions, were not meant to be there. Like, how do we transition from one thing to the other? Or I'll say you're going to do the first like third of a phrase, then you can do the last third of a phrase, and then you're going to do the middle. And like, what does that look like if we mess up the way it's all put together? And then like ad nauseum, essentially. So we'll go, and then we'll take one of the phrases that we just created. So let's say we just like messed up the order, and that's like a new version of it, and it looks completely different. And then I'll go from there, and we'll mess up like the arms and legs of something. Or I'll just ask someone to take the idea of the phrase and then improvise on that. So like they have to feel what that phrase felt in their body. So if it just feels so awkward, which is something I want to embrace sometimes, because again, it's about the dancer. Like if I'm not performing, like it doesn't give a shit. Like if I like it and if I can do it, like it matters if they can do it and if they can like own that movement. So then they'll take what that phrase made them feel, and they will take kind of cues usually from the phrase. So you'll see like glimmers of it, but then I'll also see a lot of like their personal movement, and it helps to blend my style with their strengths and proficiencies and things that they're really good at and like want to be able to do. So then that will create a whole new phrase. And usually that takes like a majority of the time in a creation process. So you'll just spend all this time creating material. I do work really linearly. I usually have a plan. Like I'll plan it out. I do a lot of writing out. And I'm also really inspired by the music. So usually I have a plan of like what I want to happen. It will get influenced like by working with the dancers. But generally I'll say, okay, I want like a big group section to open this. And then I want like a duet maybe. And then that's going to burst into like a larger group section, which will fade into a duo, which will move into a trio, which will be a solo. And then I'll take the phrases and then that we've just created, we usually have like 10, like there's so many. We usually have way more choreography than I ever need. And then I'll start breaking down like who's going to do what, where it's going to go. Usually I mess it around and they all hate me. But we'll take all those things and start putting them in place and start analyzing transitions basically. So like, how do you go from this big group section into a smaller group section? And that's like the stuff that gets a little bit harder. But basically it all comes from one tiny phrase that you start with, that you make. And I usually hate, quite honestly. I'm usually so sick of it by the end. And I'm usually like, this is the worst thing I've ever created. But by the end, like you don't see it anymore, which is one hard thing. And I know it's really hard for like a lot of creatives. You just like don't know where to start. But I always have to remind myself that where you start is like, it doesn't have to be where you end. Like it is almost never, that original phrase is almost never in the final product. There's like maybe like an arm that comes from it, or maybe there's like a similar like shape that we're frozen into that I found that we like, but it's almost never that phrase at all. It's something else. So yeah, that's a little bit about how I create. It's kind of a whirlwind. It's kind of a lot of like aggressive word talking. But that's honestly just how I create. I've worked with a lot of different choreographers who work different ways. Some work completely collaboratively. Like I've worked with some choreographers where we come in and they have no material ready. We just walk in and they say, I read this poem and this poem was really great and it really inspired me. And now I'm going to give you certain words to choreograph on. So like I had a piece that I worked with a choreographer, and it was about trauma and like the residue of like major events that happen. And so we talked a lot about these like really heavy words, and we discussed a lot about what the after effects of trauma are, and we started improvising on those. So like, for example, she gave us like the word scream, and I ended up like pulling my mouth open, and that ended up in the piece. And then we started moving from there, and like, what does that mean? So there was a lot of like people carrying themselves, and just like down the rabbit hole of we start here and where can we go. But again, that was like, she came in with nothing, and that was all us. And then she like sculpted these little fragments of ideas that we had. She found each one that she liked and then put them all together. I've also worked with choreographers who come in and they know everything. Like they know where they want your foot, at what count, at what beat, at what time, next to this person. Like they are able to just imagine it all in their heads. But again, it's like music. Some people they can like write a song, but then go in and need like 4 other people to come and like help them edit and like create the melody and the bass and the mid and all that together. Some people know everything. They can just like put it together. It's very different. But yeah, it's really, choreography is really, really similar to music in that way. But yeah, so that was my intense ramble conversation starter on choreography. And then I kind of just wanted to talk about like dance as a whole, and how a lot of people are really scared of concert dance, or just like performative dance, and being able to speak about it, being able to go see it, and not being afraid of what they saw, or being able to talk about what they didn't or didn't see. A lot of people are really scared because there's no like written out, there's no words, there's no written out summary of like what the story is supposed to be. And a lot of times in postmodern dance or modern dance or contemporary dance, there is no meaning. And the whole point is that you are gleaning what you will from it. So my advice to anyone when they go into dance is to just let it happen. Like you don't have to have the right answer, but more often than not, like you know what it is. Like we all understand basic human emotion and basic human gesture. Like even if it's just like a slight feeling, like you understand that like, okay, like they're reaching, like, okay, if they're reaching for that, or there's 2 people who are in conflict, like that's it. Like maybe that's all it is. And you recognized it. Like I have so many friends who've never seen dance before and have come to see some really fucking weird shows that I've been in. And they know, like they get it. Like they understand. So I think the biggest thing for people viewing dance and seeing dance when they're not familiar with it is having the confidence in yourself to know, like you understand it. Like give yourself the grace that you probably know what's going on. And don't be afraid to talk to other people, because even if you don't technically know what's going on, you probably saw something that someone else also recognized. And maybe they're too scared to say it because they're afraid to be wrong. But again, it's art. There's nothing wrong. Everything is right. Like maybe if you're watching Dracula and you're just like, this is a great love story. I mean, is it technically wrong? Probably. But maybe that's the version that you saw, you know? So I really think that is something that people just need to love and accept and get into dance with. One really cool thing right now is that a lot of amazing companies are either live streaming or posting a lot of their performances on YouTube, on their Instagram pages, or on like Facebook. And I think it's a really great way for people who have never really experienced dance and don't really want the pressure or spend the money on something that they're not sure that they would enjoy. And it's like a very low pressure situation. Like you can go in, click on the YouTube link, and if like you're into it, you can keep watching and you can fall down the rabbit hole. Or you can kind of be doing something else and watch it and have the chance to like think about it and view it and see it. Like I said, in like a very low pressure environment. I definitely encourage people. One of the greatest contemporary dance companies in the world is called Netherlands Dance Theater. You should check them out on Instagram. They've been posting a lot of either clips or footage of their work, and it's a lot of things that normally the general public or just people who can't go to a performance will never get to see. They're very like closed with a lot of their choreographic rights. So it's something that's really exciting. It's kind of a plus that's coming out of quarantine. Dance is becoming a lot more public access, which is something that's really cool. So like I said, you should definitely check out Netherlands Dance Theater. Again, that's on their Instagram. If you've always been curious about ballet, and I've always been like it is definitely like annoyingly elitist, but New York City Ballet has been posting a lot of their every Tuesday and every Friday. Each one is up for 72 hours. Some of their like masterworks, and they are very, very tight with their choreographic licenses. So normally if any sort of video of them pops up, it gets taken down within a couple of days. Like it just like doesn't exist on the internet outside from this. So you get the chance to see some of like the most beautiful ballet works, personally, I think, that I've ever seen for free and online. And again, it's like this very low pressure environment. You get to see dance. You get to be like, oh, wow, that's crazy. And it makes it easier to talk about when you see more and you're exposed to more things. But yeah. My name is Emma. Again, I'm a Atlanta dancer and choreographer. Before this wild quarantine hit, I danced with two groups here in Atlanta, one called Kit Modus. You should check them out on Instagram. We're really cool. We bring in some really cool choreographers. We work with the Commonwealth Fine Arts Center. That's where we're in residence. We also work with their School of Dance. So literally at the beginning of all this, we were supposed to have a show with the kids and with a lot of other community artists. We work with a lot of really cool people. Shout out to Mugshot Cheryl, who is creating these amazing art pieces and also costumes that we did like a whole photo shoot in. Johnny makes these amazing costumes out of like antiques that he all puts together. But yeah, that's at Kit Modus on Instagram. And then the other group I dance for is called Zoetic Dance Ensemble. It's gonna be at Zoetic Dance on Instagram. Actually, we were supposed to be performing today and tomorrow at our big festival that we do every year here in Atlanta called Mixtape. We bring in women and femme choreographers and dancers, performers basically, to showcase work in the Atlanta. We bring in some people from the UK, people from New York, all over. It's gonna be a really cool festival. Lorona canceled it like so much. We are also going to be doing a virtual week of classes this next week. So if you follow Zoetic on Instagram and you're someone who feels confident or just like want to try it from the comfort of your own home, some of the people that were supposed to be presenting this weekend will be hosting classes all week, which is going to be really cool. But yeah, that's me. I talked a lot about dance. It was a good time. I hope everyone has a great day and stays safe from Corona and keeps creating. This is a great time to kind of force yourself to push the boundaries. I've definitely had to make myself create in a time when it's been really hard for me to create, especially in these last couple weeks. Living in Georgia. Wonderful state. But yeah, keep creating, keep moving. Tori will be leading a beginner hip hop footwork class very soon. So you should tune in and do it. There's gonna be some amazing music, art for the rest of the night, all the way through midnight. Come party with us. Have a great day. Bye.